Hello, everyone, and good to see you all. If you are able to, we would love to see you on camera so that when we're chatting later, we can see your face and know who we're talking to. Thanks for joining us. We're super excited for this event, and we'll have a couple of people still trickling in to join us. But today's session will have breakout rooms. So if you are unable to join those breakout rooms, please go ahead and put an asterisk at the start of your name so that we know to exclude you, that you'll be dropping off before we jump into those. But we hope you were able to join us and chat with some peers on today's call. With that being said, just a few quick announcements about Small Giants. We have our Small Giant Summit coming up this month from April 29th to May 1st in Detroit. And the theme is connections. Our registration is actually closing this Friday. So if you haven't registered and are able to join us last minute, we would be thrilled to have you there to experience some in-person Small Giants event. And then we also have some other virtual events coming up here in the next month or two. We'll have a small group problem solving event as well as a conversation with our Hall of Fame inductees who will be announced here live at the summit. So we'd love to have you learn from them, get a chance to connect live with our model Small Giants leaders in breakouts that way. And with that, I'm excited to introduce Priscilla Pipho, who is the founding partner of Balanced Culture Consulting, which helps business leaders improve strategic performance. Priscilla is a certified Myers-Briggs type indicator coach, a former Baldrige examiner, and has served as an advisor to leaders for 20 years. She's managed many high-performing teams, and her greatest passion is connecting organizations to their people. And she's about to help us do just that. So Priscilla, please take it away.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad that you decided to come today. I wanted to say hello. And the first question I want to ask you guys before we get started is, what books are you reading? What are you filling your brain with these days that's inspiring you? Put it in the chat and we can share. I always love to learn from people. I usually have books as props when I'm giving a presentation, and I'll have one here today, and you'll get to see one of my favorites in a minute. But share with that. Today's a day about learning from one another. I'll give you some slides and some things to think about. We'll give you a chance to share your stories towards the end about what you have learned. And I think it's just going to be a lot of fun. So feel free to jump in and ask questions, and give me just a minute to get my slideshow set up. Here we go. So you can see my slides now? Good. All right. So when you think about the culture of your company as your brand promise, you start thinking about connecting people as important as connecting to your customers. So I love to use this visual because this shows us what connections are like in when you're looking at electronics or electricity or connecting to information. But it's the same kind of thing when you're connecting to people. You have to have a clear connection. People have to understand what's expected of them in order for them to be successful. And while I've called this from purpose to profit, and we're creating a culture that drives engagement, really what today's going to be about is learning about how to hold people accountable. Because a culture of accountability is what ends up giving us that drive from purpose to profit. So, any of y'all have dogs? Does anybody here train dogs? Does anybody put in much time into training? Well, you know, with having a dog, what they are like, and what I love about dogs is that you can't fool them. You can't pretend to be something that you're not. They're always going to be looking to you for what you're doing, not what you're saying. They're looking to you for your presence, what you're giving them, and typically they're looking to you to know what to do, unless you're my dog Pepper, and then she's just wanting something to eat. But when you have a dog, you learn about what it means to be consistent and to communicate in a way that the other person can understand, the other being, because they're completely transparent. They're not looking for hidden agendas. They're looking for something very clear. What I love about dogs is that when you're training, and I've trained a lot of dogs, the first dog that I really learned about was a Border Collie Irish Setter mix. And we took her through agility training because she needed that much focus. And I learned so much about how dogs communicate. And one thing I learned was that every dog is different. Every personality is different, just like with people. There's no two ones that are alike, but they all have a consistency, and that is how they communicate. And I learned this early on, that one of the things they do is they communicate with their eyes. My dog Pepper, when she was younger, I had taught her about what the word squirrel meant. In fact, we couldn't even say it around her because she would just get up and want to go. And one day I'm sitting here working, and all of a sudden she backs up next to me, and she's looking away, and she's looking and she's looking away. And I realized the first time it came to me, how she was communicating was where she was looking. And I realized that as leaders, where we're looking is where people are going to look to. They're going to be going. And the other thing that's similar with dogs is that they're social animals. We talk about dogs as being pack animals. So people are the same. People need to know clarity of what's expected of them. They need to know the clarity of where they belong. And that's what today is about. It's creating a culture of accountability through clarity. Okay, so my very first job when after I gotten married, so it's been 28 years ago, was working at a botanical garden, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. And if any of you have ever been to Austin or familiar with native plants, it was one of the best places in the country and still is for research and development. And we had a wonderful place, and I loved going there every day. But what I found very quickly was that in this beautiful setting where you had the true believers, everybody believed. It's a nonprofit, and the people who were there believed in the mission, and they believed passionately. But they also believed in getting their stuff done. And I was marketing communications, so I was pulled in a million different directions. And I realized back then, and this is before I'd started really managing and leading, but the only way that we were going to succeed was that if we all started going in the same direction, because we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the energy or the time. I ended up getting burned out and I ended up leaving, but I took away that lesson. And one of the things that it helped me see in my next job was I was introduced to the book by Patrick Lencioni, Five Dysfunctions of His Team. Now, I'm sure many of you have read this. If you haven't, please go out and buy it. It's just a real simple way of looking at things that helps you understand why silos sometimes are effective, but usually if you're trying to get everybody to go in the same direction, not so much. And so and you know this from leading, excuse me, an organization and a team, everybody's got to be rowing in the same direction. What I learned from that experience was when they aren't, not only do we not have the energy or the resources to keep going, when waves would come at us, when unexpected events would happen, we wouldn't know necessarily how to respond because we're all going in different directions until the day that 9/11 happened. So when 9/11 happened, we were all stunned, but we all began to come together. And we began to realize that immediately in that moment, we needed each other. And we needed to make this place a place of sanctuary. We had a single focus that day. We shut everything down and then reopened it and had free garden days for the rest of the week because we wanted people to come. We wanted people to feel safe. So when we had that unity, we were able to come together and weather the storm. And you know this from leading teams. And we all have this understanding of what we need to be doing. But because our brains tend to forget things, we need reminders. The one thing that I took the most away from the EOS, and I know entrepreneurs love using the EOS system, but when I read Traction, the number one thing that stood out to me was the cyclical nature of humans. We're cyclical, and about every 3 months, we need to be able to get a refresher. And in adult learning, the curve of forgetting is something that we keep in mind, that we have to have reminders. So we need to reminder. We know that we've learned something, but we still need to be reminding ourselves and giving people permission to remind us. So that's why we're here. So leaders create connections, right? We're always leading. We're never not leading everything that we're doing. And the connections that we're doing, that we're making, are connecting people to the work that they need to get done, the work that their daily tasks, but also to their purpose. And of course, we know from being purpose-driven leaders that connecting people to their purpose and the purpose of the organization helps create a profitable company. It helps create organizations that have values and purpose are shown to be more profitable and more productive. They're shown to be more desirable and to have a stronger engagement. And how many times when we know that what people need to be done, what needs to be done, if we're connecting people not just to their purpose, but the why, and connecting them to how it gets done, we're going to be able to give them a better idea of what accountability looks like. So creating a culture of accountability is, we're going to just keep going further on this. We're going to get more and more granular, and hopefully you'll find some things that you can take away that you'll be able to use. As we know, people tend to do what they think is expected of them. When my dog is looking at me, when she thinks she can come and stand right next to me in the kitchen, it's because she's gotten away with it, right? When I remind her that she's supposed to lay down and drop and stay back, she goes and does it. She does what's expected of her. We do what we think is expected of them. When we're not holding people accountable, that becomes a new norm as well. When I'm not making her lay in that spot every time, when I'm not holding somebody accountable to how they're treating the people around them, that becomes the new normal. And the second thing is painting done. Are y'all familiar with Brene Brown? Dare to Lead. This is one of her examples. And a client of mine that I was coaching, and I was saying, okay, you're complaining that your staff person isn't doing the things that you expected her to do. What exactly are you telling her? And as I watched the wheels turn, he said, Priscilla and her damn questions. And he came back with the phrase painting done. And, I'd read the book, but I didn't remember that phrase. Painting done is when you're very clear, when you walk through what the expectations are going to be of what the completed task is done. So when people aren't doing what you're expecting, you need to take a look at first at how you've explained it. What are they doing? And what do they think they should be doing? And then think about what your non-negotiables are. And I put secret in parentheses because frequently we can tell you what the non-negotiables are. Well, my non-negotiables are people show up to their desk on time and they're ready to go. But there could be some that you're not telling people, but you're secretly waiting for them to figure it out. Make sure that you're very clear. People are going to do what they expect, what they think they're supposed to be done, and they're looking to you for that guidance. This is something that we all know. But when we start to hold people accountable to those expectations, we're clear about them, we're holding them accountable, and then we're allowing people to be successful elsewhere if they're not paying attention and doing the things that we've been very clear about. It actually makes everybody else successful. I worked at one place where a team member on one of the teams, I was overseeing HR. So I was one of the directors in this place, and I overheard a team member going, why aren't they making sure that people are doing what needs to be done? I'm doing my job. I'm doing my job every day, but this person's getting away with it. And I realized as soon as we started cutting people loose that were dragging other people down, everybody, the whole energy of the place. And I'm sure you've all seen that when you finally get to that point when you've let somebody go. Sometimes it creates the synergy that you need. So we've all heard of KPIs and KBIs. Key performance indicators are the what that needs to be done. But I hadn't heard this term KBI until last year, and I'd been using it for years. KBI is the performance, the behavioral indicator. So performance is what you do. The behavior is how you do it. One place where I worked, I was again overseeing HR, and I was helping them let somebody go who had just been awful. She'd just been breaking all the rules and had been difficult to manage and hard to be around. And they finally let her go after a long time of having these conversations. And when we let her go, I sat down with the director and the deputy and I said, okay, what is it that you want in somebody that you hire? I said, well, that's really clear. We want somebody who's smart, can think for themselves. They can think outside of the box. They're a problem solver. They're a go-getter. They're a self-starter. I said, okay, let me get this straight. Why did you let Gloria go? I said, well, she wouldn't follow the rules. Okay, I get it. We think we're being clear when we hire people in about what we want them to do, but because they weren't giving themselves permission to talk about the behaviors, she was also belligerent and she was difficult and she was argumentative. Yeah, she wouldn't follow in the rules. And yes, there was a disconnect between what they were hiring for and what they were firing for. So we got that straightened out, but understanding it's okay to manage for behaviors. And that was one of the epiphanies for me to realize managers thought they should keep people forever. So let's see how we can tie behaviors to profitability. When we start holding people accountable to what they're doing and how they're doing, and we clearly define that, we can start to create that culture of accountability that we're looking to find. So how many of you have core values in your organization? And so core values um, give us a way to define behaviors, a way to talk about how we do things. But so often our core values are what we just have up on the wall, or we have it on the website. And when it comes to really talking about what that looks like, until we add in behaviors, people may not know. We were teaching a class on helping a division who had really high turnover to develop their own onboarding system. And we asked the leader of that group, what are the things that you hold that are important to you? And she said, accountability. Well, accountability is fine and it doesn't really mean anything until you start talking about what exactly does that look like. For her, accountability meant you do what you say you're going to do, and she needed to make that clear. So think for yourself some of the core values that you have and what an example is of exhibiting that value. And then think about an example of violating that value. Tie behaviors to that. So anybody want to provide an example, or shall I give my own? Okay. If you want to say something, take yourself off mute and jump in. Otherwise, I will give you my example, which is, let's say that our core value is treating others with respect. Well, for me, that behavior might look like coming to a meeting on time. For somebody else, it might look like listening without interrupting. So one thing we encourage the leaders of the organization to do is look at what your values are and then start defining them in terms of behaviors. We had one client who called it go zone and no zone behaviors. When you look at the behaviors that you want people to be exhibiting, they need examples, they need clarity, because otherwise they're just words up on the wall. And when people are violating that, it's this nebulous thing until we create something that is very clear. Oh, I see a hand raised. Eric.
Yeah, I didn't want to just jump in while you were talking, but we spent a lot of time on our core values as part of going through an EOS process. And, as you're talking about having an example of what it looks like when we're living it and what it looks like when it's being violated, we've got a whole document that was built around this that we use to give speeches around and when new people come into the organization. And I'm happy to share it if I can. I don't know if I can upload documents into the chat, but I'm happy to share it for everybody to see the work that we did on this if it helps in any way.
Wonderful. And that's really the learning today, is being able to share. Do I need to stop sharing for him to share it?
No, this would just be like a file upload into the chat, so I don't want to disrupt your presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. I think that's really exactly what this is all about. How are you doing this? Because we're learning from each other, and I learn from you every day, every person that I work with, and the current client that I'm working with. And I know that they've done the EOS, but I think that right now they're doing something completely different, which is they're inventing their own system. And they've created what's called core expectations because they had the core values. We hired in a new human resources manager, and one of the first things that she said, and I'm curious, Eric, how this has worked for y'all. One of the first things she said was she was looking at write-ups that they were doing, and she realized that they were writing people up for core value violations, but they weren't terminating. They weren't creating performance improvement plans. They were just going, well, that's kind of a nice to have. And typically what we look at is, well, are they doing their work? And how often have you had somebody doing the job and they're being a jerk to everybody around them, but they're a really good salesperson, and so you decide you're going to keep them. And you know from that experience the toxicity that that can create. Well, what these guys decided to do was they took the job descriptions that everybody had. They took the expectations that they had, their key performance indicators, and then they overlaid that with every position has expectations about how you're living the core values. And they call it core expectations. What they started doing was driving the core values into every person's job so that they're holding them accountable, and they're talking about it, and they're meeting about it, and they're having those conversations. One of the slides that I took out of this, because I figured everybody knew this, was you start with strategic planning and your vision and where you're going, and you go next to your playbook. But oftentimes we forget to have those clear expectations that are in writing, and that we're meeting with people on a regular basis. People need to know how they're doing. They need to know in face-to-face meetings where they get a chance to talk. And if you can tie that, the behaviors and the expectations all together, then you're going to be giving them something that you can really hold them accountable to. And for me, the ripple effect happens when you get managers. You train the people who are the leaders, people everybody's looking to, and how to hold people accountable. And it's, even if you hire somebody in with one job description, you can go back in and overlay it with expectations and hold them accountable. But once you start getting your leaders within the organization to hold people accountable, it starts to not only rise the tide, but it creates this ripple effect because they start seeing what should be done. Because the opposite happens. If you're not holding people accountable, you get a different ripple effect, which is all of these different things going on, and it's disruptive. So for me, creating clarity and accountability comes in this little model. And this is one of my favorite graphics. My business partner created it, and we called it How to Create a Developmental Organization, deliberately developmental. But what it starts with is onboarding. And I want you to think about if you use human resources to bring people on board, think about maybe switching that model. Bring your managers into the process. Have them start from the beginning. Have them start with the hiring, of course. You're going to have them involved, have them in the recruiting, have them in defining what the person is that it needs to be. Teach them how to be good at articulating those expectations. And then the onboarding starts with them. Did you know that the studies have shown, there's research for when people are onboarded consistently with supervisors, retention is increased and turnover is decreased. You're reducing your turnover because people know. Back to my analogy of the dogs, is that we are social and we need to be connected. We need to know where we fit. If you spend your first day in HR, it's teaching you that compliance is more important to HR rules than it is to the work that you're doing and the people you're doing it with. So I strongly encourage you, create that connection from the very beginning to the people who are defining the work. It's magical. Then as you are bringing them in, and even if you've already brought them in and you need now and you didn't do that, you can still pick it up right here, because you need to be clear at this point about what's expected. It's crystal clear, as we talked about, core expectations, core values, core behaviors, however you want to put that, but have it in writing and have it in something that people can respond to. Then you equip them. You begin to grow them. You begin to give them what they need in order to be successful. And you have regular cadence of communication to find out what's working, what's not working. You give them the feedback. You start the feedback communication process during this. And as you begin to see productivity increase, you're going to begin to get to what Tuckman calls in the stages of team development, the performing stage. The stage where people are getting it and they're firing on all cylinders and they're making things work. And when you're at that point and performing, you begin to increase the retention of the good people. the people that are good, that are performing, that are contributing. You're holding them accountable to that performance. And that's also the point at which, if they're not performing, it's okay to release them, to let them be successful elsewhere. And that increases your retention, and it reduces your turnover tax. It reduces the cost that goes into every time you've got a personnel issue, the cost of people touching it and dealing with it, of hiring and rehiring, of bringing people back in for interviews. Everybody is spending time on that. That's part of your turnover tax. And when you, I'll tell you that the number one feedback I get from leaders when I either give them a presentation or just having a conversation is that they now have permission to let people go who are not performing, because we're good people. We care about people. We want people to be successful. We want to take accountability for when they're not. What did I do that wasn't clear? And so we tend to keep people way past their expiration date. And as we begin to understand, I'm doing all of these things that need to be done, it's okay to let them be successful elsewhere. This is one of my favorite stories to tell, because this helps us to see there's a model that we can follow. There are things that we can do that can help people be successful. So my question for you is, what stories do you tell? What stories do you have of successfully managing to behaviors? Just like what Eric was saying, that's going to be a great story. We're going to get into breakouts in a couple of minutes and give you a chance to share the stories with each other where you've been successful. Share the stories when you haven't been successful. The stories when you learned what it meant to be accountable. For me, it's a story of not holding people accountable and realizing the damage it was causing. Help the stories that we tell. The reason that they're so important is because they define pivot points and they define characteristics that we want to see be repeated, or they're legends or lore that we can pass on. What did you guys learn? So what would you like to share that you think will be helpful, whether it was a story that you told or a story that somebody else told, that you think will be beneficial or helpful for others? Hey, don't be shy. Raise a hand or just go off mute. Eric?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Like, I just being conscious of not dominating a conversation. So stop me if you if you want somebody else to jump in here. What I shared was a story of a couple years ago. We apply our core values not only to our team but also to our clients. And we had a situation where our fifth largest client, it was over $250,000 of revenue, was constantly abusing our staff, calling them names and things like that. And so we took the same approach, the three strikes approach, sat them down. The owner of the company was like, well, this is how I lead, I dominate, I this is how I talk to people, and this is how I get respect. I demand respect by, just basically lording over everybody. And we're like, well, that's not really how we're wired here. And I say, you can call me names all day long, it's fine, but when it starts to bleed into the company, it's unacceptable. So we wound up terminating them. And as I was mentioning with our group chat, is you have to kind of remember now, as the story gets older and farther removed, you have to keep telling that, to remind the newer people that come in that, hey, oh, by the way, here's an example of how we will live these values on your behalf. If it's not just applying here, but it's applying to everything we're doing. And it's important that people understand that we will make decisions like that are not, there's a financial component to it, but that's not the number one thing we consider when we're making those decisions.
So I love that story. That is, and I think it's one of the things that we forget, is that how we treat our customers and how we treat our clients should be. I mean, our employees should have the synergy and should have. That's beautiful. But I have a question for you. You said financially it's a hit because you're losing this money. Do you think that it freed up resources for you to gain new clients that were more aligned with you?
Well, I think, this is kind of the whole conundrum of business, is like, you've got to have, finance people, sales, operations, everything's got to be running concurrently. And if something starts to slip behind, it affects the whole process. So having sales engines is a part of giving you that freedom to make those choices easily, because you're out there finding new clients that will fit. And it's a lot easier to find new clients than it is to find new good employees who fit. So again, keeping that perspective of, do I want to try to find a new help desk person, or do I want to try to find a new client? Well, there's a lot more clients out there than there are qualified help desk people that want to be part of an employee-owned company. So it's an easy decision that way, but you got to have your eye on the ball for all those areas of the business. Because if you don't have a sales engine, you make that, it's like, well, now you can have catastrophic consequences that result in people losing their jobs, and it's not their fault. So that's part of leadership, is making sure all those levels. This is why I have such, you can't see it, but gray hair. it's not easy to keep those bars moving at the same level.
And so true. I had a slide actually in there of somebody juggling, of a business person juggling, because you have to juggle all of those things. And oftentimes people will take the culture bit out because they don't think. And I love what you just said, and I'm going to quote you, is that it's easier to find a good client than it is to find a good employee. And the other thing I love that you said was that you tell that story over again because you want to show them that telling the story of how we live the core values on your behalf. We have your back. We care enough about you that the story tells how we're going to protect you, I think is a way to say it. I love that. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
I have less of a story and more of a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, we can go into questions. We're going to do questions. We can do them right now. What question?
My question is, say your company has been in the habit of letting things go too long culture-wise, and you would like to shift that culture to the rising tide lifts all boats. What's your advice for getting that culture shift to be well received, and the buy-in from managers and the organization?
Excellent question. And it's turning the tide is hard, and turning the ship in the water is hard. There's nothing that's going to be a panacea or a quick fix. And a lot of it depends on the size of your company, the size of the leadership team. We always talk about alignment, that everybody is aligned at the level where we make decisions. But for me, having managers aligned, and that's one of the areas that we so often overlook, is having managers be the ones that are holding other people accountable, but they're equipped to do it. Because when you are ignoring behavior, you're not going to get it. So that's the first thing, is align your leadership team. Second thing is align your managers, which is part of the leadership team. The third thing is pull all of the responsibilities that everybody has. As you start to align people, start to put it into their job descriptions. These are the things that we're going to be aligned to. But you asked about buy-in. And from Lencioni, as he says, people need to weigh in order to buy in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've brought that a lot of times to bosses and go, we need to get everybody to buy in. We need them to weigh in. And they're like, I'm not going to do what they say, so why should I have them weigh in? It's not so much that you have to do what they say, it's that you want them to be on board, right? So if you have opportunities, let's say that you're deciding at the leadership level to change things, give opportunities for people to have a say about how the change will affect them.
Right.
Does that make, and that's not something you don't know. It's just now you're thinking about it with a different lens, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we want to go to questions? Does anybody have any more stories? So what other questions do you have? How you can implement, and I don't know, Tessa, if that was helpful. If not, feel free to email me and ask me something more specific if you'd like to.
I had a quick question, Priscilla. When you were mentioning, I love the KBI, the key behavior indicators. Do you tie them to performance indicators, or do you recommend tying them together, or is that kind of a separate column bucket entity? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you create the creative tissue, the connective tissue, or assume people can kind of do that?
It's a great question. And it's one of those things, Katrina, that so I've got one of my clients I was talking to yesterday who's so excited that he'd finally been able to get a performance plan that included all of it. And he used AI for it. And my first thought was AI, well, that's not going to give you what you want. He said, I kept refining more and more. What his problem was that he had people in a delivery crew that were insubordinate and they were keeping them. And he said, how do you manage performance? And he just started going deeper and deeper. He was looking at the tasks, but he was adding in the behaviors that weren't working. So you want to do both at the same time. But the reason I'm telling you the story is that it took him some time to layer it in. I think having them both in, and it, of course, depends on the person and the level that they're at. If you're dealing with an executive or somebody higher in your organization, I would encourage you to sit down with them and say, these are the, and get them to collaborate with you on it. These are the performance indicators. You may want to have behavioral indicators that everybody has. When you start to put together behavioral indicators, but then tack them onto everybody's job description. We will, without fail, be at work on time if that's one. We'll have fun in our work and we'll be uplifting to others, and we will not have jokes at their expense. That's another example of a behavior. So having that, does that help at all?
Yeah, that does help. I think we've been adding a lot to our job descriptions lately. We did a reorg in December, and so we added a level of like personal growth trajectory and where this business. So I feel like it could kind of fit within this, like by way of following these types of.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Having that personal growth bit in there is really one of my favorite things to do. And I also like to, when I do the and have a cadence. Don't say that we're talking all the time and you know what you need to do, but have a time when you sit down together and you have that conversation regularly so they have a chance to give you feedback. But also collaborate with them on what they want to grow in, because it needs to correspond with their why and their, you know, I'm on the council, the council at my church, and I've taken on the job of evaluating the performance of the pastor because he'd never had a performance evaluation in his whole life. So we're sitting down and talking about it. I talked to him about goals and growth and development, and he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so the first thing that I said was, well, wait a minute. I know that you've got a goal of getting a PhD. So let's talk about what that means in the job that you're doing. So I understand where his long-term goal is, but we can layer that into how he's doing his job here.
Joshua, please ask your question. No?
In the chat.
I'll ask. We've been having funny conversations while you've been answering. I just want, before I ask my question, I just want to add one thing on the personal growth. I've always, as a manager, as a 10-15% of the rating, I've always had my team ensure they submit a professional development plan to me. And I rate them against that. By the way, I've had many of my managers push back on that, which is odd. But saying that, the missing link that I find very, very important is to make sure that managers are beholden to their team's personal development plan. That if their team is not achieving their personal development, damn you, manager, it's your fault too. Anyway, my
And that
question
should be
is,
in their expectations. Managers should have a list of expectations, and one of them is developing other people.
yeah. My question is, and I'm sorry if this is a silly question, how is leadership different than parenting and similar to parenting?
I love that question. That's not a silly question at all. My experience in managing managers, which is what I love to do, is that the managers who are really good parents, and the favorite employee I ever had was one who had gotten her degree, instead of going to work, she went into raising a family, a military wife, got out, got a job. She was the best manager I ever had because what she understood was that people need to communicate differently. I'm a big Myers-Briggs fan, and she got that right away. Everybody and all of her kids were very different. She knew how to get the best out of them. Parenting is a very good, they say you should have a dog before you have a kid. You should have kids before you have managed people. I don't know. But I think that you're spot on that there is a very big similarity. You've got independent thinkers, you've got people who are part of a tribe, you have people that are connected by a purpose, but you also have individuals, and you have individuals who are motivated differently, who want different things out of life, and yet you're trying to get everybody to go in the same direction. Those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts on that? Anybody?
I definitely became a better manager after I was parenting and vice versa. But the motivations thing for sure.
Yeah.
Or when they can even receive, sometimes it's like,
Yeah.
my kid needs fed before they can even receive like the next thing. Like there's just like, and you're like, oh, I started to notice that my teammates was like, they're just like, we gotta fulfill human basic needs before then we're like trying to code or
Yeah.
give performance evaluations or strategize or whatever. Yes.
And I think it also creates a level of emotional intelligence. And I've been having that conversation with people lately, people in tech and people in law firms lately about understanding other people and their needs. And now that you reminded me of that, Joshua, I'll help layer back in the part of parenting because that's Heidi's absolutely right. Until you give people a chance to get those it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If we don't get those basic needs met, we're not going to be as effective. We're not going to be able to contribute as much. Such good questions. Anything else that I can provide a little bit of insight to? I'm learning from you guys, so that's how it always works for me. No? Okay, so before you leave, what's your one, put it in the chat, take yourself off mute, whichever. What's your one takeaway that you're going to take back with you this time?
The KBI. I
KBI.
already pasted it in our leadership chat. Like, here's a talking point we're gonna have to think about.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, it was a revelation for me because it's a thing. Like I actually found a graphic I could put in a slideshow about it.
I love that you mentioned Maslow because I'm huge into Maslow in terms of like you have to know from an employee standpoint, like everybody's kind of at a different spot and everybody wants to get like some people will get to a certain spot and they're good. Like this, I don't want to enlightenment. I don't want to be this
Yeah.
and if you're trying to drive everybody up there at some point where people are comfortable, you'll drive them out. And we're trying to disrupt the HR function in our business. And I've got like a 25-page document that I wrote for the recruiting to find this person. And there's a whole section on Maslow in there about the person that's coming in has to at least have a functional understanding of where this fits into the HR function. So I'm hearing everything you're saying and I'm aligned with
Awesome.
that.
I'm so glad you're disrupting HR because that is that can end up being, I know one of the people on the call is an HR manager that I know. I'm glad she's gone because HR can be the downfall of your organization if we give it too much credence. It's not doing what it was originally intended to be done. It's more about compliance. That's why when I call myself fractional HR, I used to say, but not compliance. But no, you're right. You're spot on. And if you haven't read John Maxwell, you might want to because one of his 21 immutable laws is that there's a lid. People have a lid and not everybody wants to keep going. So yeah, I
had
love
a coach early on because I'm one of these obsessive driven people, and he's like, you're just gonna be so hard to deal with because you're trying to make everybody like you. And he goes, not everybody in the world wants be this level that you're trying to attain. He said something, he goes, the world needs bricklayers too. And bricklayers oftentimes are very happy being bricklayers. So stop trying to make them unhappy in a role that they don't want to be in. And it
Great
was kind of
advice.
like, I still have a hard time understanding why somebody would be happy laying bricks, but that's my problem and my therapist's problem to deal with. But it was kind of a revelation, like, okay, yeah, everybody doesn't want to be constantly moving up and elevating. And it's like, okay, we have to lead and manage in that regard of getting people into their sweet spot.
See where they are, see and understand where. For me, it was, I had somebody, an employee say, I'm not you, because I was motivated by how we were treating people around us and kindness, but also being organized. So she had to give me advice, which, not always easy to hear. We're not all the same, and we don't all get motivated in the same way, but we're learning, and we're learning from
Well,
each
I could talk about this all day because to me, there's a theory of business growth that ties into this.
other.
And
Yes,
businesses have to find their sweet spot for growth, because if you're not growing enough, you're not creating opportunities for the people who want to grow in the business, and they'll leave.
yes,
If you're growing too fast, then you're going to violate your culture and bring people in who have no business being in there, don't want to be there, not the right fit, or you're not training them properly. So you got to figure out what that is. And the bigger you get, you can't necessarily go by percentages either. So
no,
this is all factors into how difficult it is to establish, grow, maintain all these things, but it definitely plays into the culture. And if you're not careful, it just goes like that.
have you heard the term resonance frequency?
Mhm.
It's exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for that resonance frequency that's going to get you in that sweet spot, and it's just as much an art as it is a science.
Yeah, getting there and
Yeah.
staying there.
Getting there and staying there. It's looking at a lot of different things, but when you're paying attention to the thing that needs to be paid attention to, and that's the people. And when you get those, and I'm going to quote you, when you said that I can find new customers, but I can't find new people, because that's your biggest investment. Getting the right culture fit, getting them to understand it. And as you said, you bring new people in too quickly, you disrupt that. So part of it is the onboarding and cloning yourself. Do you feel like you have enough leaders in your organization that see things the way that you do?
We're getting there. I literally just went through an exercise of blowing up our leadership team and creating 2 new ones for each division, because there was too much dissimilarity between the two that it was causing friction in the leadership team. So we had to build 2 new ones out of it. And I actually put somebody else in the visionary seat of the other division, because I can't sit in all these different roles as well. And he tests out exactly as I do. So he's more capable of leading that division from a skills and visionary standpoint than I am, but like it has to align with the overall company vision. And him and I have known each other for 25 years.
Oh, good.
So it's not like somebody who's just come in and I don't, we've worked together, we've been in the trenches, grew up kind of in the business together. So but it's all a delicate balance. I mean, you're constantly looking and reevaluating, and at some point you just start questioning, am I the right person for this? It's kind of where
Yeah.
I'm at. It's like, am I qualified to be leading a company?
And all of that is really important. I mean, that self-reflection is something that we should always be doing and always asking. And sometimes it takes just disruption to get there so that we get deeper and clearer. I talked to somebody yesterday who said, people who haven't done self-work can't really be trusted. So I'll leave you with that nugget. Eric, if you'd
Yeah.
like to get on a call another time, I'd be happy to sit down and have a chat.
You block off a whole day.
I love that. I love that. Eric, I just sent you Priscilla's contact information too, because
Thank you.
it's been fun to hear this whole thing. Thank you so much, Priscilla, and Eric. Thanks for sticking with us to the very end. We are over time, so everybody was dropping off. It's been a busy April 16th here, but thanks a bunch.